Solemn times we're living in now in these last days, and we want to be found prepared as we can see the close of probation is right upon us. I want to begin with a statement coming from a book, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, and page 61, which says, Perilous times are before us. In our work, we must show the people the danger they are in. Let not the solemn scenes which prophecy has revealed be left untouched. If our people were half awake, if they understood the nearness of the events portrayed in the revelation, that a reformation would be wrought among our people, in our churches, and many more would believe the message. My friends, it says we have no time to lose. We are to watch for souls that must give an account. Watchmen, what of the night? And we can say with certainty, the morning cometh and also the night. The mark of the beast crisis is upon us. The second coming of Christ is even at the doors. And today, the themes we'll be covering, Unleash the Beast. We'll be addressing this religious army in connection with the New World Order. The world gives it that theme. We know it's the mark of the beast crisis. And to discuss this and more, I have a special guest with me, Marie Diaz. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor. It's great to be back. We're going to cover a lot of interesting material today. Can't wait.
Let's get right into it. So, what are your eyes focused on?
Well, Pastor, we have talked at length about the fact that the world as a whole is in transition. In fact, recently we've covered how the Trilateral Commission came out with an article recently in which they said the year 2023 was actually year one of this new world order. And so in this presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to show, based on several articles and several clips, that this is in fact what is taking place, that we're transitioning to this new world order.
And of course, we know that based on prophecy, it's going to be war against God's commandment-keeping people. And this is going to be one of our themes, army bringing wars, fulfilling Revelation 12 and verse 17, that dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. And the place is right here in the United States of America. It begins here, based on Revelation 12, verse 14 through 17, and chapter 13, verse 11 onward. So as we're seeing this, we are talking about the New World Order. Marie.
Yes. And so we're going to take a look at this first headline from this article from The Nation. And it says here, the old world order is dying. What new world order is struggling to be born? It goes on to say, the forces of change are so complex that I doubt anyone can offer a realistic vision of the sort of world order or disorder that might emerge. But it does seem as if we are indeed approaching a historical watershed, and I'll say moment, when an old order fails and a new world order seems inevitable. So based on this article here, they're saying, based on historical events, that we are in fact transitioning to this new world order. And it's interesting because in this article, I was thinking about the fact that in times past, there have been several prominent figures, I think namely former President Herbert Walker Bush, who talked about this idea of a new world order, this new idea. And it's interesting because back then it was considered a conspiracy theory. And here we are on the cusp of this new world order, and it's coming to fruition. And so, as we go on here, we're going to see that it's not just this headline from this particular news agency that is saying that we're transitioning, but there are others who are saying the exact same thing.
From the inception here, people need to understand that when we see these phrases, look at them, understand them through the lenses of Scripture. New world order intimates an old world order. Now, of course, that's what the article says, that they're transitioning from old world order to new world order? Well, in the Bible, do you know it speaks of a new world order and the old order in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6? The often quoted scripture, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Verse 7, of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end, and upon the throne of David, his kingdom, to order it, to establish it. So God has an order. The government shall be upon his shoulder. Order, policies, order, principles. And the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant on their shoulders. And what was in the Ark of the Covenant? The Ten Commandments. So God's biblical order entails the Ten Commandments. Marie, I wonder, what is at the crux of this new world order?
It's to destroy the commandments. And we know that Satan has always attempted to overthrow God's order. And we're going to see that he's going to use human agents to be able to do just that, not in heaven, but here on earth. And so as we continue here, we're going to see that now we know that Klaus Schwab was the head of the World Economic Forum. And he's just recently stepped down. And now there's a new leader. I believe his name is Borge Brand, if I'm not mistaken, Brand rather. And he just came out with a new video, which was released on the 7th. And here he is discussing the fact that we are in fact in transition. And I just want your audience to bear in mind that we're talking about an organization that annually meets with leaders from across the world. And, they're shaping global policies and they're implementing various agendas. And so we're talking about, very prominent figures coming together and they're detailing us and they're telling us what is in fact taking place. So we're going to take a listen to this clip here and see what he has to say.
All right, clip one.
We are between world orders. We had one world order post the Cold War that enhanced and incentivized cooperation. And no, we don't really know what the new world order is about, but cooperation also has to play a role in that new world order. But currently between orders, and we know that from history too, there is disorder. So one has to really struggle to find ways of cooperating when countries are also competing for increased influence in a new world. And hopefully this new world order is not the jungle growing back, but there is ways also to collaborate in a very competitive world.
Now, he just confirmed, as I stated, that we are transitioning from one system to a new system. I also want to underscore one of the points that he mentioned in the video there. He said that a part of this transition, there may be potential disorder. And of course, my mind goes to the fact that the motto of the New World Order is order out of chaos. And it's interesting, Pastor, that you just mentioned the fact that there was an old order, right? But there also was an old order here in in the world, right, where the papacy ruled the world. And it's also interesting when you look at the parallels that when the papacy rose to prominence, of course, it was amid, disorder. And could it be that as we're transitioning to this new world order, we're going to see some disorder, which will essentially lay the foundation again for the papal hierarchy to rise to prominence?
And that video clip is recent from the new head of the World Economic Forum. And based on scripture, on that same point, Marie, based on scripture, this man just said the new world order is going to comprise corporations. These are the merchants. And the Bible tells us that Babylon makes the merchants rich. It's connected. And notice carefully that since the pandemic, post-pandemic, the Pope has made frequent statements stating it's time to implement the new economic order. And then he came back, the new world order. and the WEF and the Pope of Rome are on the same bandwagon. So God's people need to be awakened. The signs are here. The last days are upon us.
And not just that alone, he also talked about the fact that there has to be cooperation among the nations. And so it's a uniting of all of the nations together. Again, this one world government in this new world order. So now, as we're moving forward, as we listen to the second clip from the leader of this World Economic Forum, I want your audience to pay attention to the fact that he points out who underpins or who the New World Order hinges on. And this is going to be important as we transition in this presentation. Take a listen to this clip.
All right, here it is.
This is what we have to get used to in the New World Order. Is a very competitive world order, and I think the new Trump administration will underpin this, but I think history has shown us that we are able to also deal with that.
Mercy. Yes.
Now that's interesting, right? Because he's saying this entire New World Order system is hinging upon the Trump administration. That's interesting, right? Because now he may have his reasons why he is saying that, but of course, as Bible students, we're looking at it from a biblical perspective. Now, we're not saying per se that this Bible prophecy is based solely upon Trump's administration. What we're saying is that we know based on Revelations 13 that Bible prophecy hinges on apostate Protestant America. And so the fact that this world leader is saying that this next administration is the one that underpins this new world order, to me, that warrants us paying attention to what it is about this particular administration that causes him to say that.
And I think we are going to see a three-pronged attack here, Marie. Number one, he's talking about Trump administration in league with the New World Order from two prongs, two perspectives, two roads, two avenues. Number one, civil and financial. Civil and financial. And later on, we're going to show there's also a religious element calling for a new world order under and during the Trump administration. So we have to live as if 2025 is going to be the year the mark of the beast is enforced. That's how we have to live. And if it doesn't happen, at least we are prepared.
Absolutely. And, we've already established the foundation that from several perspectives and angles, the world as a whole, as we've mentioned, is transitioning to this new world order. And that's aside from the fact that we haven't even touched on the fact that we're going into a digitalized era, right? This is something that no other generation has seen, CBDCs, inoculation passports, digital IDs. We've never entered a system, a generation, a time in which all of these elements are converging at the same time. And so I just wanted to throw that out because I think it's important for us to remember that as we're transitioning to this new world order. But the other point that I want to bring out is the fact that President Trump himself has said that we're essentially going into this new era. Of course, he didn't use New World Order. He used another synonymous term. He talked about the fact that we are entering into a new golden age. Let's just take a look at this new headline from the New York Post. It says, Donald Trump's historic win paves way for new golden age. And of course, we're going to play this clip here. And we've presented this before, so we're just going to touch and go, where he again reiterates the fact that we're entering into this golden age. Take a listen to this.
Here it is.
Nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. Many people.
Marie.
Right. And, so this is so interesting that he's talking about this golden age. And so now we know, again, apostate Protestant America is going to develop into the image of the beast. So as in the beast, so in the image. And now we see that in Revelations 13, like I said, America is referred to as the image of the beast. And it's interesting, Pastor, right? Because didn't ancient Babylon also have a golden age in which they forced individuals to worship? Could this be what he is implying? Of course, he may not think of it that way, right? But again, those of us that are Bible students, we know where these movements, and when they're referring to, when they're using this type of language, we know that there are other implications to what they're saying.
Now, again, for those who missed that point, the golden age, that is the head of gold in the image of Daniel 2. And the head of gold was ancient Babylon. And they had a golden age wherein, number one, they forced individuals, number one, to go along with their health protocol and diet protocol, just as we saw in the pandemic. That was the golden age. And secondly, they forced people to worship falsely an image. That was their golden age, the head of gold in Daniel chapter 2, ancient Babylon. As it was then, so it is going to be in the last days with modern Babylon, the golden age. And just realize that was the WEF president now, who is calling for a new world order, who also said, welcome to 2030. You will owe nothing and be happy. So the new world order entails the loss of sovereignty, individuality, your freedoms. You become slaves to the tyrants, the powers that be.
Right. And now, Pastor, you touched on ancient Babylon and you briefly touched on modern Babylon, but I think it's important for us to also emphasize that as well, because we see in Revelation chapter 17, right, that modern Babylon, mystery Babylon, is going to be prevalent in our day and our time. And so as we're looking at the characteristics of Babylon, because we have to look at the substance to be able to understand the image, we have to see how mystery Babylon, which again is a part of ancient Babylon, how and what their characteristics were like, so that we can see what is going to develop here in the United States once we begin looking like the image of the beast. Now, it's interesting because, sometimes God he's so good to us. And when we're paying attention, he gives us signs and he shows us things so that those of us that have eyes to see will be able to see where we are in the stream of time. When President Trump was elected president in November, and of course he was just recently certified, there was a news agency in Europe called the New European who came out with an article. And I'm telling you, they used prophetic language when they created the cover of this article. I'm going to have you take a look at it. And then I would love to hear your insight on this article. I mean, it kind of, for lack of a better way of saying it, my mind is just like, I can't, the fact that they're using prophetic language. Let's take a look at it. It says here, the beast unleashed. Unbelievable, right? The fact that they're using prophetic language. Now, of course, we know that the United States, President Trump's administration is not the beast itself. However, it is the image of the beast. And so the fact that they are telling us that the beast, and I'm just going to add, the image of the beast is unleashed, that should be a signal to God's people.
I agree. I mean, we're seeing the signs. So now we want to see how this administration is going to assist in the work of establishing the image of the beast. And that's what we need to see. There it is, my friends. And of course, the beast unleashed, Protestant America will form an image to that power. Marie.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is where we're going to kind of transition in our presentation. And of course, as you just mentioned, we're going to show how the image of the beast is going to be transitioning and is going to start looking like the image of the beast, the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church. Now, there are some things in this presentation that are new, and there's some things that we have seen in the past. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to touch and go on some of the things that we've already seen, but I thought it was important to put into this presentation so that we can lay this foundation so that we're not missing any points here. So it's important for you to stick with us. And one of the other points that I wanted to discuss is the fact that the United States, excuse me, not the United States, the Roman Catholic Church is the smallest nation in the entire world, right? And we know that historically speaking, when she rose to prominence, the only way that she was able to further her ends and she was able to persecute heretics, those who disagreed with her, was through military power, right? And she was able to do this by using the military might from other countries. Now, this is interesting because, also biblically speaking, when she received her deadly wound, this is why she was no longer able to force people to adhere to her doctrines. Now, we're going to take a look at this article from the Britannica. And we're going to see how I'm just confirming what I'm saying based on these articles. And Pastor, please feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. This article here from the Britannica said the Crusades. For more than 2 centuries, the Crusades remained a powerful movement headed by the Pope. And it says the crusading ideal was applied to military and religious campaigns. Goes on to say later popes launched crusades against heretics and opponents of papal authority and sanctioned the emergence of military orders. And so again, just to reiterate, we see that the papacy established her power through military force, right? Through the crusades. And I'm emphasizing this because that's going to be the nail that's going to hold this presentation together as we're building this presentation.
Continue. I also recalled that in 2000, John Paul II came out with this grand apology. And in that apology, he mentioned the atrocities, the crimes of the Roman Catholic Church for the past 2,000 years. And notice it says, they fall into 7 general categories of wrong, which include, without being too specific, everything from the Crusades, there it is, to the Inquisition, the forced conversions. Now, you think about that. So when they had the military backing of nations, they could force people to convert to Roman Catholicism. And all dissenters were prosecuted and persecuted and killed. And Protestant America will form an image to that. So we must expect the rise of a military power within the U.S. that is connected to their religious arm.
Exactly. And so, as you rightly stated, as in the beast, so in the image, right? And so we're going to see that the administration that is about to take office in January is already starting to look like the beast. We're going to take a quick look at this headline from The Spectator. It said, Trump's very Catholic cabinet. Now, I want to mention the fact that it's not just his cabinet that is looking very Catholic. They talked about how there's 12 prominent Catholic leaders that are part of his cabinet. But I also want to emphasize the fact that Trump himself says that he is Presbyterian. But if you look at some of the things that he's posting on social media, he has an affinity towards Catholicism as well. I think about the fact that during his Trump rallies, he's played Ave Maria. He has put posts about St. Michael, the Virgin Mary. I remember during his last administration, he went to a shrine, and so he's constantly projecting Catholic imagery, right? And so you talk about the fact that he has a Catholic cabinet. You're talking about the fact that he has, like I said, this connection with Catholicism. And then you think about the Supreme Court, which is overwhelmingly Catholic. So across the board, now recently just came out, a headline just came out that the new U.S. ambassador to the Vatican is also not just Catholic, but he advocates implementing the common good. Now, I didn't, include this in this presentation, but again, on every side, you're seeing how what is supposed to be a Protestant nation is looking more and more like a Catholic nation, right? And that's the purpose, because eventually we know that the beast is going to use the papacy is going to use the United States to help rise to power.
Continue.
Yes. And so now this is important for us to discuss. And the reason why, I'm really harping on this idea about the army is because as we're moving forward, we've been told in the Bible, God has given us signs and indications that the beginning of the end is near, right? Now, when I think about this, right, when I look at the Bible and some of the things that the Bible has prophesied, I think about Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, right? When the disciples came to Jesus and they were asking Jesus, specifically, they say, Jesus, tell us, when shall these things be and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world, right? And so they were asking Jesus a twofold question. They associated the destruction of Jerusalem with the end of the world, right? What's interesting is that Jesus didn't separate the two ideas. Right? When he was describing the destruction of Jerusalem, he used the same language also to describe the end of the world, right? And one of the things that Jesus mentioned is the fact that in Luke 21, he talks about the fact that there is going to be an army. And again, Pastor, please jump in whenever you feel, whenever you want to say something here, right? And so one of the unmistakable signs that we should be looking for is the emergence of this army. And I just want to read this from Luke 21, verse 20 and 21. It says, and when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolations thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out. And let not them that are in the countries enter into. Now, the sign that they were supposed to see, I want to reiterate, is literal. It's physical. They were actually going to see the armies converging on Jerusalem. And so, Pastor, would it make sense that if Jesus gave them a literal sign, right, for both the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world was a literal sign, the convergence of an army, wouldn't it make sense that we ought to be able to see then a literal army converging and standing where it ought not?
That's correct.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want to put this point in the mix. Very, very important. When you look at the beast power, Popery, Marie, you mentioned that she used, everybody listen attentively, she used the military might of nations. I want someone to watch this. Do you know that within the Roman Catholic religion, there's actually an order that is military? It's called Jesuits. The Jesuits were the military arm of the Roman Catholic Church. Not excluding, Popery used the military might of nations, but within her religion, the Jesuits were the military men, the military arm of the Roman Catholic Church. And the Jesuits were raised up to counter the Protestant Reformation. That's the beast. Watch carefully now. So, since America will form an image to that power, the beast, that means within Protestantism, look out for a group, look out for a sect that is military in mind, militant in mindset and objective. Can we see that there is a military arm within Protestantism? Again, don't conflate America's military, such as the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, etc. That is a military branch of American politics and way of life. I'm speaking about within Protestantism in America. Is there a sect that is militant, military in mindset? Watch carefully. Is that the army? Marie, talk to us now.
Yes, Pastor. And see, I love how you said that, right? But not just the fact that they're just militant, right? But the fact that they call themselves an army. And this is something that I believe that many of us have missed, and why I thought it was so important for us to take a look at this, right? Now, we're going to look at Trump's new administration. And I believe with all my heart that this is that prophesied army that we see in the Bible, right? And again, Pastor, as you just mentioned, we're not talking about the established U.S. Army, the U.S. military, but a religious army. And not just a religious army, but this religious army also has to have the idolatrous standards. I don't think they caught that. They also have to have this idolatrous standard, right? Not the literal idolatrous standards, the eagle that the Roman army brought into, the outskirts of Jerusalem, but we're talking about also this idolatrous standard, namely the false Sabbath, right? And we're going to see this here. Now, again, we're taking this presentation step by step so that you don't miss any of the layers. The first thing that we want to mention is the fact that President Trump, although he's attempted to distance himself from Project 2025, he is in fact going to implement their agenda. And we're going to take a look at this first article here from Kevin Roberts. It says, Heritage President Kevin Roberts, there is no doubt that Trump will implement Project 2025. So again, if you thought that just because he said that he had no association with Project 2025, you can put all of that to rest. Matter of fact, he recently did an interview, I think it was with NBC News, where he openly discusses the fact that Project 2025 is very good and very conservative. Now, you're going to hear Kevin Roberts himself, and he's going to talk about the fact that he will implement their agenda. Take a listen.
Here it is.
So one of those names was Russell Vought, who I think it was announced yesterday is going to be in charge of the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, as part of the new Trump administration. This was the actual agency that he was writing about in his section of Project 2025, which he was one of the authors of, talking about how it can be used to deliver much more radical change. So in some very direct senses, Project 2025 is happening, no matter what anyone says.
Russ is the greatest living conservative expert on the Office of Management and Budget. Not only did he write that chapter in Mandate for Leadership, he also served in that capacity in the last Trump term. And so if there's anyone who understands how you legally, appropriately, and aggressively use the Office of Management and Budget to do the will of the American people rather than the will of Washington elites, it's Russ Vought.
A lot maybe of the Project 2025 agenda may now actually happen no matter what the candidate, as then was saying. Is that fair?
It is fair, and there's no doubt that will happen. I don't mean that with any disrespect to President Trump, whom he knows, who is a friend, but just to say there is so much overlap between President Trump's official campaign platform, Agenda 47, and the policies in Project 2025. That's what I mean when I said that it's sort of boring in one sense, because it's not newsworthy that the Republican candidate for president would be saying many, if not most, of the same things that the conservative movement itself would be saying.
Marie.
Right. So let's put that nail in the shoe place. He said that he will implement their agenda. Now, the question is, are they fulfilling this prophecy where Jerusalem is being compassed with armies? When I saw this, I'm like, Lord have mercy. Let's take a look at this. And this is coming from Project 2025's website. This is unbelievable. Take a look at this. It says policy agenda. Our goal is to assemble an army. Lord have mercy.
In your face.
Of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one. How did we miss this? And like I said, it isn't just about the fact that they are calling themselves an army, but they are carrying the idolatrous standards. And is it just happenstance that they're using the language in army? I don't think that's happenstance. And not just that, as I mentioned, remember, they're bringing in their ideas into the White House. The Bible tells us in Mark chapter 13, verse 14, that when we see an army standing where it ought not, we are supposed to flee. I hope we're seeing this.
And this is the religious army standing where it ought not, meaning church and state uniting.
Yes.
The army, it is here already. That means we can actually say that the Heritage Foundation and its leaders, along with Project 2025, their leaders, their allies, they represent the Jesuits of the Roman Catholic Church. Again, the Jesuit is that army within that system of Roman Catholicism. In Protestantism, we're now seeing the image of that, where you have an army. And notice, we have Kevin Roberts, who is a staunch Roman Catholic. So he understands the beast power. You are going to need a sect, a group that is aggressive. Day one, get this agenda implemented, church and state union. So he's carrying the trace, the DNA, Marie. Kevin
Yes,
Roberts,
sir.
he's carrying the DNA of Mother Beast into America's politics and religion to form the image of the beast. When you shall see the nation surrounded with armies. Now, there is an application for the U.S. military. We know that. Navy, Marines, etc. We're talking about a religious surrounding. This is the army. Don't you forget this. And as you rightfully said, how could we have missed this, Marie?
Right, right. And again, so now we're going to take a listen to, and there are several clips of this where they're talking about the army. And, we didn't include, some of these other clips from, other leaders who are part of Project 2025. But when I'm thinking about these things in hindsight, right, when we talked about how, for instance, J.D. Vance, when he talked about the fact that we need to arm ourselves with muskets,
Yes.
and we need to circle the wagons, when you hear J.D. Vance talking about we have to use the ruthless, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he talked about using ruthless exercise of power. When you hear Russ Vought,
So
again, these are authors, individuals who are entrenched in Project 2025. When they're using this language, it makes sense. Russ Vought talked about battle plans. Matter of fact, there were clips where he said, listen, if you don't want to go to war with me, I don't want to serve with you. You have to prepare yourselves to go to prison, to go to jail. And there were other individuals who had various things along the same lines. Kevin Roberts talked about how there is going to be a second revolution and it'll be bloodless if the left allows. Again, Kevin Roberts isn't in the U.S. military, but he's a part of this religious army. And when you start looking at the fact that this movement, I believe, like I said, is a part of that prophesied army, things start to make sense. So we're going to take a look at a couple of clips here in which they themselves, you're going to hear from the horse's mouth, they are going to continue to reiterate the fact that they are an army and they're coming to war. Let's take a listen.
Here it is.
A video, but what we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state.
He was actually quoting from the opening page. He simply just used a few synonymous words, but he was quoting directly from Policy Agenda. Exactly what he was quoting. We are an army. Go ahead, Marie.
Right. And I hope your audience caught that he talked about weaponizing this conservative movement. And again, we're looking at this from a biblical perspective, right? They may be thinking one thing as they're walking into office, but we know the trajectory. We know where these things are tending, right? We have to catch the undercurrent of these things. Now, the next clip, we're going to see, again, this is a former head of Project 2025, Paul Dance. He stepped down, but I want you to listen again to what he has to say about this army that's going to be taking office on January 20th. Take a listen.
And don't forget, when they say to war against the deep state, that means one thing. But again, it's all those who oppose their agenda. Would that not also include God's commandment keeping people? Stay tuned.
A video, but
Here's your clip.
a video, but what we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of
It doesn't happen.
Our after the chaos and confusion of his first term in office, Donald Trump has a detailed plan for his second coming. It involves reshaping the very pillars of American democracy. And there's already an army of loyal recruits who are prepared to carry out his orders.
We have a database with over 10,000 people from all walks of life. But we want people who've been canceled, who've figuratively given blood for the movement.
They want to bring shock troops into the government who focus on dismantling government.
If you're not on board with the president's agenda and you're in a consequential position, you need to step aside, or you need to hold your tongue.
Marie.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Right? Did you catch what he just said? He said that Project 2025 wants to bring in shock troops and into the government. They want to dismantle the system, right? And so, again, I want to reiterate the fact that we're not talking about the established military that's already a part of the U.S. government. We're talking about Project 2025's army. Now, we have to ask ourselves, what are their plans? What is their objective? What are they seeking to establish to do once they get into office? And I think this following article is going to give us a little more insight, and this also will help us to better understand how the image of the beast is beginning to look much like the beast itself. Let's take a look at this next headline. It says, Project 2025 author says in leaked video that Trump has blessed his agenda. It says Project 2025 can't help but reveal the right-wing radicalism at the heart of its crusade to remake the American government. And I just want to reiterate that, the crusade. And that brings us back to what we originally said from the Britannica, right? Because we know, historically speaking, that the beasts used the military might to crusade against those who are opposed to their agenda. So, of course, those are critics who are saying that they're going to crusade. But what we're going to see as we move forward in this presentation, that they are using the same terminology.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so as we look, as we're progressing in this presentation, we're going to take a look at another headline. And this was interesting to me. It was kind of an anomaly, but again, hindsight, when I looked at all the pieces together, it started to make sense. Let's take a look at this article from AP News. It says, an architect of Project 2025 is pressuring Republican senators to confirm Pete Hegseth. It says Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts said Thursday that his group will spend $1 million to pressure senators unwilling to back Pete Hegseth. Now, at first, like I said, why in the world would, a religious think tank want to spend $1 million to confirm Pete Hegseth, right? Like I said, it seemed like an anomaly, but when you understand Pete Hegseth's history, it starts to make sense, right? Let's look at this article from The Political. It says, Pete Hegseth's crusade to turn the military into a Christian weapon. So now it's starting to make sense, right? Because we know that he has an affinity towards the Crusades and the fact that he wants to turn the U.S. military. Now, we were talking about how Project 2025 is an army itself, but they're going to come into office and they're going to convert the standing military into a weapon to go against God's people. I hope that God's people can see what's happening.
I can see it. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you can tell by what he promotes, Pete Hegseth.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly, right? This article from the Daily Mail talks about his tattoos. And again, we've touched on this before and how there are links between the markings on his chest, the Dies Vult, and how that refers to God wills it, and the Jerusalem cross that's on his chest. Also, those have direct links to the Crusades during the 11th century. So all of the elements are in place for those of us who have the eyes to see it. And so, again, We don't want to conjecture. We want you to be able to see it for yourself and to hear it for yourself. And so we're going to play an audio clip where this person that the Heritage Foundation is attempting to get confirmed, they're willing to spend $1 million for. I want you to hear what he has to say about developing an American crusade. Take a listen.
Here it is.
America has the top economy and military in the world, but our cultural and educational institutions, America's soul, have succumbed to leftist rot. Military might and worldly wealth alone are not enough to preserve our founding principles, nor are once-in-a-generation electoral miracles like 2016. Our future existence as sons and daughters of freedom requires the satisfaction of a single paramount objective: the categorical defeat of the left. America cannot and will not survive otherwise. Our time calls for an American crusade, yes, a holy war for the righteous cause of human freedom. We make a lot of assumptions about where our culture is, and we're wrong. And if we don't crusade a holy war, a righteous holy war for freedom, we're not going to save it.
Media of the beast. Go ahead.
You know, again, I keep going back to Luke 21, verse 20. You know, when we see the armies, you know, as in the days of the disciples, so in our days, we're starting to see how all of these things are falling into place. And as I mentioned, you know, we talked about the fact that you had this religious army that's converging, that's taking office in January the 20th. We also see that the head of this administration, President-elect Donald Trump, is also using the same similar language. Remember, historically speaking, the beast itself used military might to go against their enemies. And there is audio, there's video where Trump himself has said that he is willing to use the National Guard, the military, to go against, and I quote, enemies within. And so yes, he may be talking about his political opponents, but we know, again, looking based on Bible prophecy, that one day that military might is going to be used against God's people. Let's take a listen to that clip here.
Here's what Trump said on October 13th in response to a question about whether he expects chaos on Election Day.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
Trump then reiterated his comments during a taped town hall with Fox News' Harris Faulkner on October 16th.
They're very, very different. And it is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous.
So, yes, Trump has talked about using the military against Americans he called the enemy from within.
I don't know, Pastor. I think that we've made a pretty compelling case that, you know, we are on the very cusp of these end time events fulfilling themselves. You know, and I just want to close on this point here, you know, in volume 5 of the testimonies, page 464, where Sister White says, as the siege of Jerusalem by the Roman armies was a signal for flight to the Judean Christians, so the assumption of power on the part of our nation in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath will be a warning to us. It will then be time to flee or to leave the large cities. And of course, you know, that's the final signal, right? But should we wait until the event takes place for us to flee the cities? Again, remember, they've already told you a part of their plan is to implement Sabbath laws. And so, brothers and sisters, I hope that we can see that, you know, time is winding up.
So one of our focuses today was to show us the fulfillment of Luke 21. When you shall see Jerusalem surrounded with armies. And as you said, a compelling case was made today. I want to add to what you have shared, so people can understand that this is not a stretch of the imagination, that we're simply grabbing at straws as if we're drowning, as if they mention army and we simply took their phrase and say, look, prophecy is being fulfilled. And what we're seeing is simply conspiracy theories. I want to be clear when I say this. When Christ gave prophecies in the Old Testament, whatever he said would transpire, the people could look for those signs and see them about to transpire. For example, when Babylon was ruling and Nebuchadnezzar was given that vision, Daniel came in to tell the vision and to give the interpretation thereof. He clearly said that there would be a weaker nation that will overthrow Babylon. And later on, it was a bear that would rise up on one side, 3 ribs in its mouth. So when God says, these are the traits, look for them, the people in the days of Babylon, if they were vigilant, they would have seen the nation that conquered 3. That nation was coming. It was a dual power nation, a dual Medes and Persia. The signs were clear. If we want to move on, we can go down the line with the leopard, Greece, the dragon power, the Roman Empire. But look at the little horn. The Bible could have simply said a horn that would rise up among the Roman Empire. Didn't say that. It says little horn. So we can identify the smallest nation worldwide that is the power. It's clear. When God says, look out for this, look out for it. So now in Luke 21, Marie, when Christ says an army, so we must begin to look in America, where do we see this sect claiming to be an army? And this sect must have the traits of Roman Catholicism and Protestantism. Breaking news. These are the religions that comprise Project 2025 and Heritage Foundation. And they're calling themselves an army, a very aggressive army to unite church and state. So what Christ said we must look out for, we're now seeing it. And it's very interesting that this rhetoric, we have never heard it before. So what are the scoffers going to say? Can they say, well, we have heard and seen such a group before? Show me. Show me that group as we see today in the past. With all these characteristic traits, show me that group. You won't find that group. The signs are here. The last days are upon us. And what happened recently? We see the outgoing administration all of a sudden declared the bald eagle America's national bird. Marie.
Yes, Pastor, right? Again, and you touched on that, the fact, and again, when you look at the parallels of what happened anciently, right? And why would he wait almost 200 years to confirm or to establish the fact that, the bald eagle is now the official bird? I believe that providentially God is attempting to wake up his people, just like the article we presented, the New European, where they used prophetic language. Again, if we want to see the signs, we'll see them, and again, and I've talked about this in time past about how even in Noah's days, those who were unbelieving were confirmed in their unbelief. Those who saw the signs and took heed to them, those were the ones that were saved. So my hope and my prayer for all of us is that we will pay attention to the signs, and it'll be a confirmation for us to help us to hasten our footsteps to be prepared for these final events.
I'm going to come back to you for your closing words, Marie. The bald eagle, as you stated, why wait until this time of Earth's history? Over 238 years to now officially make it the national bird. God is attempting to awaken his people because the Bible, in prophecy, let me get that correctly, in prophecy, America's founding is connected to the eagle. We covered those points in a previous session. I'll post that link below. I don't want to go there right now. If you take a look at this, the bald eagle is also connected to America's military. The bald eagle. It is connected to, one, deliverance from persecution, and also the bald eagle is connected to persecution. It was the Roman standard. That's what the military of Rome would march with on a staff, on a pole. And all of a sudden, we're seeing this now, being official. And God says, when you shall see Jerusalem surrounded with armies. And we're told based on history, that was what they had. The Roman standard is what was brought. And that was a sign for the Christians to flee from Jerusalem to the mountains, implementing the 5 keys of survival. And of course, Marie, this eagle is connected to sun worship. So the Roman standard is linked to sun worship. Let's go back. And Project 2025 leaders and spokesperson and Heritage, what do they want to implement? They tell us. Marie, remind us, what do they want to implement in America?
Sunday rest.
To use the government to force people back to church. The incoming president said that. The Speaker of the House said that. Heritage says that. Kevin Roberts, and the one who wrote that segment of the Mandate for Leadership, his name?
Jonathan Berry.
Jonathan Berry made that statement. Sunday worship, the signs are here. The eagle, sun worship, as you can see right there in that article. For those who want to see it, the signs are not only clear, but ominous. Is America a new Rome? Of course it is. Because America must form an image to popery. That's it. Pagan Rome and papal Rome. The signs are here. Your closing words, Marie.
Pastor, what more can we say other than another indication that it is time for us to flee, to hasten our footsteps? You know, God is showing us signs left and right. We've talked about the digital era. We've talked about from a religious perspective. I mean, in nature, everything is indicating that time is winding up. And so the question for each and every one of us is, what are we going to do with this information? And as I've stated previously, it's time for us to get ready. It is time to get ready. May God help us to do just that.
So friends, that's why we emphasize the 5 keys of survival, because when you see these things, God says, flee to the mountains. And we're told in Adventist Home, it's country living. Implement the 5 keys of survival. And by God's grace, we can be found prepared. I want to thank Marie again for joining us from Eyes on the Times to share with us these pertinent information, how current events are fulfilling end time prophecies. I don't know about you who are live with us and you hereafter, but I see the need for prayer. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we're thankful today for what was shared. Give us spiritual sight that we may have great discernment of the signs of the last days. And may we be found implementing the 5 keys of survival and assisting others in doing the same. Keep us faithful. Take away the spirit of fear and give us love, power, and that sound mind. Because perfect love casts out all fear. We thank you for hearing us. We thank you for answering. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. By God's grace, friends, I'll see you on tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern for Midday Power Surge. God bless. Maranatha.